You want to do announcements? Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Come on in. Always an unruly Wednesday night group. All right, just want to go ahead and get us kicked off tonight. You see I am wearing a hat, which means I'm not teaching tonight. I would never teach in a hat. Wait, can I? I don't know the rules. I was raised in Florida, not the real South, so I don't know actual manners and rules. Some prayer requests tonight. My dad, of course, is doing well. He's still over at Waterman, up in the ICU, and they are reintroducing some of those medications after surgery to see if the other stuff that they did Sunday is actually working. So he said he's doing well. He was able to stand up and move around without getting dizzy and all that stuff, which is a plus. So keep him in prayer. Mick Mao, he went to the hospital Monday to visit my dad, went home, and then went to the hospital himself. And so they ended up doing a heart cath on Mick and seeing what was going on there. It turns out they didn't need to do any stents or anything like that, but they did find out that his aorta is enlarged and that he only has two flaps on it instead of three. And so they were kind of going back and forth. Do we do surgery? Do we monitor it? And they ended up releasing him. He's here. He's here. Well, I thought you'd be. No. So you can see Mick's here. They did not do any surgery today. They are going to monitor him and watch him, and we're going to do our best to monitor him as well. Make sure he doesn't overdo it. Right, Mick? Yeah. But, man, it's good to see you here, brother. Good to see you here. Lindsay Roberts, her grandpa Lloyd Athey is his name. Lloyd Athey. His health is not doing well at all. She's been up recently to visit with him. Keep Lloyd in prayer and Lindsay and her family in prayer. Also, a repeat prayer request that has been in there. Margaret Wimmer is home, and she would enjoy visitors. And so if you ever get a chance, she just lives right down the road here. She'll want to sit on the back porch with you and look over the lake. And if you're lucky, you'll get a glass of sweet tea as well. But she's great to go talk to and visit with. So if you get some free time, go and visit with Miss Margaret. She's an awesome lady and could use some company for sure. Vernon is also at home and is doing well. He went in to the hospital Sunday, I think what he told me was a muscle bleed in his leg. And so they had him wrapped up and compressed for a day, and ended up, he came home, I believe, yesterday. And so the girl said he doesn't need anything right now, no food or anything like that. So just keep him in prayer and give him a call and see if he could take a visit or anything like that. I'm going to stop right there with all of our different announcements. Make sure that you look in the one call that comes out and you can see all those announcements, the upcoming events and all that stuff. It would take us a long time to go through. Miss Brenda, of course, we got report last Friday from her lumpectomy that they did get all of the cancer out. As far as we know right now. So we are praising God for that. And we're just going to move on forward from all that, right? But no more 3-month cruises away from us. I think that's the rule. I heard from the doctors. Yeah. The one in June with us. Okay, that's only 3 days, though. As long as you're with us, we're good. We're good. All right, I just want to tell you this. I am so glad to be a part of the Orange Avenue church family. Man, what a blessing. What a blessing. You all got to see some of, I was struggling a little bit Sunday, just timing of everything going on. And in the moment, Jeff Bay came up and he just wanted to preach. He wanted me to take a break and preach. And I mean that in the best way. He's ready to go, no matter what. He was at least going to give me a hug, and then say a prayer for Dad. And I thought you wanted to preach, and I was shooing you off because I was like, I got this, man. I can do it. But man, I appreciate that love, and Tony, and then so many people's love and prayers. My dad we got SunQuest coming up tomorrow. Friday it starts. We're gonna have 1,000 teenagers in Orlando and having a blast. And typically my dad drives the trailer for us down there, and he's all upset he can't do that. And then I thought, I'm going to go to my next possible backup, Mick Mao. Mick was set to go and then went into the hospital too. And so I was hesitant to ask anybody else, just in case. But I'll tell you what, so many guys have stepped up. Hans Van Dingsty got the trailer over here. Scott Otterson's going to help take it down tomorrow afternoon. And then Bob Fasig's going to pick it up on Sunday and bring it back here. Just so blessed with so many people who love and serve. And then I was talking to Keith last night, and he said, he asking how I was doing, and just, all that stuff's going on. And he says, hey, do you need somebody to teach? And last night I said, no, I got this. And then I woke up and I remembered the voices of some of our wise elders here and other people in my life who said, you got to learn how to accept help. And so I texted Keith this morning. I said, are you still up for it? Because it let me go and be at the hospital a bit more and get a lot of SunQuest stuff wrapped up. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'm so thankful for so thankful to be a part of the Orange Avenue Church of Christ family. It's a blessing. So I'm going to pray and I'm going to get out of the way. Tony?
Praise for my successful cataract surgery.
All right. Tony had a successful cataract surgery. We've clapped for everything else. We might as well just say that. We're thankful for that cataract surgery. All right, but let's pray, and then we're going to get into an awesome lesson with Keith tonight. Our most Heavenly Father, we love you so much. And we could sit here all night long and list the many reasons why we do. But God, you are everything to us. And I'm so thankful that we don't have to face things like sickness and health issues and all that stuff without you and your comfort, without your strength and your love. So God, I'm just thankful for every single person that we get to worship with, the love that they show so willingly. And when you designed the church, you knew exactly what you were doing. So God, thank you for letting us lean on you, and thank you for letting us lean on each other. And we have some we want to lift up to you, God. We want to lift up to you my dad. We want to lift up to you Mick, Lindsay Roberts, Grandpa, Margaret Wimmer, and Tony Becker. We want to lift up to you Brenda Cox and Vernon Means. And God, in so many of those ways we're rejoicing. In so many of those ways we're saying, God, we need you. And so we ask you tonight that where healing is needed, that we beg you to provide it. Where recovery is the path forward now, we ask that you provide sustained health. God, where encouragement is needed, we surround people with the love of this church family and surround people with your comfort and strength. God, we know you've done amazing things throughout history. We've seen you do amazing things here. And God, we believe you'll continue to do great things. God, help us as we study your word tonight. Help us as we go to SunQuest this weekend. God, I just can't wait to see what you do here tonight and with 1,000 teenagers in individual conversations that are going on tonight. May you be glorified. And may we be drawn closer to you. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Well, I know Vernon's not here tonight. I don't know if he's watching online, but if you heard at the very end of service, he also mentioned the funeral at Mount Dora Church of Christ. Joe Adams, longtime minister there, his wife, Dawn Adams Harden, passed away. And so that'll be Saturday morning as well, and I think it's in the notes on the email that was sent out. So that's another thing to mention. 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. is visitation with a service at 11. So I just wanted to note that. Also, Kenny talked about the trailer. Are you still loading the trailer after? Yes. So out this way, if you can stick around and help load that trailer, we'll get it done quick. So that'll be after the lesson tonight. If you're in the auditorium class on Sunday mornings, we're going through a class called Difficult Conversations with Youth and why we need to have them. And we've talked in that class how it's more than just about youth. Really, it's difficult conversations just to have with your neighbor, with a grandchild, with an adult child, with a friend. They're just difficult conversations. But particularly, we've been talking about why it's so important to have them with our youth, because a lot of times we don't. We get in this trap as older Christians of knowing that we believe it, and that's good enough. And sometimes we don't even think about it. And so it's been dovetailing really nicely with Kenny's lessons on worldview. And tonight, his topic, he was going to hit, how do we know that the Bible is true? And just coincidentally, again, we haven't talked or discussed at all. On Sunday, I'm going to be talking about the difficult conversation of, isn't the Bible just a book of fairy tales and myths? Basically, how can we believe that it's true? So I'm jumping ahead because I'm not going to go through the beginning. We'll do that Sunday if you're in the auditorium class, talk the beginning. But I'm excited because we'll have a little bit more time to dig into some of these things from when we look at what the Bible knows is true. But as we get into it, if you were here on Sunday for the class, you remember we had the quote from the guy who said, "I'm a Christian for one reason. I believe that Christianity is true." And so I asked the question for you to think about tonight. Can you use that quote for you? I left that blank, insert name here, because the question is, where are you in that journey? Can you say, I'm a Christian for one reason, because I believe that Christianity is true? Okay. I know I'm a Christian because Jesus died for me. I'm a Christian, but the base of you believe all of that is true. Do you? If you don't, I really encourage you to kind of look into it and study on your own and develop that foundation to be able to say that. That's an important thing. And so tonight we're going to look at a few of those things. If the Bible is true, what does that mean for you? And I know the audience I'm talking to tonight. But if the Bible is true, what does that mean for you? Okay, we need to obey it. I can trust it and depend on it. There's some dependency there. It's obeying it, but it's depending on, yeah. Anything else? Lost? Consequential. Elaborate a little bit. I think I know.
If the Bible is true, then that means that there is some, it lays claim to your life and to your future and what you are supposed to do, and has eternal ramifications.
Okay. He said if the Bible's true, there's eternal ramifications there. And it lays out a pattern on what you need to do. It becomes your authority. And that kind of dovetails into some of what Kenny's been talking about the last couple of weeks of, there's some people that don't want to believe it because of what that then means. If you believe it, it has consequences that are going to be played out one way or the other. And so that's important. So when we talk about trusting the Bible, this is a graph I always like. This is, Lee Strobel put this in his Case for Christ. It's a graphic from that. But it shows, the New Testament, we have over 24,000 copies. And yet people constantly say, well, I don't know if we can believe that it's true. Okay, we've got 650 of Homer's Iliad. We got 30 of Plato's writings, 9 of Josephus. We have about 10 copies of the Gallic Wars that Caesar wrote, that we get all of our Roman history from. Do you find a lot of people going, I don't know if that Roman history is true? Not usually. Why? Because there's no consequences, right? They don't have to depend on it. They don't have to be obedient to it, okay? The reason the Bible is so controversial is because if it is true, it has huge ramifications on how we're going to live our life. And many people, as adults, don't like to be told what to do. Don't like to be told what to do at all. Just ask the security at MDCA if adults like to be told what to do. Okay, that too close to home. Sorry, too soon for some of you. Yeah.
The other thing is it answers a whole lot of questions that people just keep pondering and wondering about. Like, where did all this come from?
Yeah. Jeff said that a lot of the questions that people are pondering about, I'm trying to repeat it for the people who are watching, but pondering about, can this all be true and all that. A couple good quotes here. You might have already read through them, but they talk about errors and this and that, and I'm not going to dig deep into the errors tonight and the things like that, because a lot of things, if you have 24,000 manuscripts and somebody misses a comma and they count that as an error, guess what you have? 23,999 mistakes if the other ones didn't have it. And that's how they count up the mistakes in a lot of that. And so I love that quote that he says, if the very number of manuscripts increases the total number of scribal corruptions, okay, because people want to say it's been corrupted through the years, it supplies at the same time the means of checking them. You got 24,000 copies. You can go through, and those little inconsequential things here or there really are not what people try to make them out to be. And then I love the second quote, and you think about the ramifications of this. Even if we had no Greek manuscripts today, when we're talking about the New Testament, no Greek manuscripts, this isn't even getting into Old Testament, things like that, but no Greek manuscripts today, we could still reproduce the contents of the New Testament from the multiplicity of quotations and commentaries, sermons, letters, and so forth of the early church fathers. Directly, closely tied, right after the apostles, the early church fathers, just from their sermons and their quotations, their commentaries, and their letters, a lot of times they recited a lot of what we have in the New Testament today, and we could piece it all together with just that, let alone the fact that we have all the manuscripts. So I'm not going to dig deep into that. It's fascinating if you want to. But that's just kind of to set off this idea that, there's all these errors and there's all these mistakes. A lot of that is, you can make the data say what you want to make it say, right? We all know that. We all heard that. We've all seen it happen sometimes. And that's a lot of that is in that way. But here are some core reasons for trusting the Bible. Okay, these are some core reasons. And I know the font is small up there on the reasons, but look at just the big ones. Natural unity. Okay, you think about the unity of the Scriptures. 40 different human writers, approximately, penned 66 books of the Bible over a span of about 1,500 years, not to mention in 3 different languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And yet the collection maintains a seamless, flawless, internal consistency from Genesis to Revelation. And there's so many streams. We have books, or you hear sermons like Shadows of a Savior, and we see how all through the Old Testament, we see how Jesus is laced through, and we see those connections, and we see how it's laid out. We see even with the Gospels, the purpose of each one that is addressing a different audience and a slightly different purpose. And then the letters to the early church. But you see this flow all the way through. And if you were here in the spring, we kind of did a lot of stuff on Bible contradictions. And people like to say there's lots of contradictions. But you go through and you look at each one and you study it and you think about it. And a lot of them, I would say all of them, just become alleged contradictions, things that people get confused. But so there's a unity to the Bible. There's factual and historical accuracy when it comes to the Bible. Okay, time and time again. And here's the great thing I love about this, and I can easily geek out on the history side of factual accuracy and historical. I love the history side of it. But the further we go, guess what we get? More and more confirmations of what was there was true. And we'll look a little bit about that tonight. There's scientific foreknowledge. Okay, scientific foreknowledge. That's the idea that there are things that Bible writers knew before what? Before they should have known it. Before science realized it. Okay, and there's some fun stuff there, and we're just going to touch on a few of these things tonight. But there's a lot of fun stuff there. There's the fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, which that one's fairly self-explanatory, but detailed, specific, predictive prophecies found within scriptures that we see. And so, not just, well, I think it might rain tomorrow. And guess what? Tomorrow, some of you are going to remember that, and you're going to think, Keith was a prophet. No, I just know that by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Florida, this time of year, it's probably going to rain. So I can say that, and I can look smart, or I can even do better. I can be like, there's a 50% chance that it'll rain tomorrow. And then either way, tomorrow you're going to be like, you know what? Keith was right. He was right. That's a smart guy, okay? But no, it has to be specific. And of course, there's the messianic prophecies that we talk about a lot. There's the prophecies of Daniel, but we'll look at a couple things tonight. And then the last one that I think, any one of these, you're building the case with all of them together when we say, why do we believe the Bible? But it's the transformative power, the core message of the gospel that changes human lives from the inside out in a way that no other book or philosophy can really replicate. I think you have to be careful with that one because there are some communities and groups that do a lot of good things that help change people. A lot of those groups, guess what? The roots of what they do is based out of the Bible. Some of the good things that they try and encourage and recite and do those kinds of things. But the Bible has the power to change people. We've all heard some of those stories. You probably have some of those stories. So those are a few core reasons for trusting the Bible, and we're going to look at a couple of them. But is there one that stands out to you, or one that you particularly, when in your own foundation of belief, that you think, yeah, that's something that really resonates with me?
One of these up here.
Yeah.
Factual and historical accuracy, to me, is impressive. It's amazing.
Yeah. Fulfillment of prophecy. Just being able to see and then, connect the dots and look. And I feel like, you're always, that's one of those things about we keep reading and reading and reading because there's always something that maybe we didn't catch or it didn't catch our eye, or somebody shares it in a different way, or Kenny says something, they're like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And there's always something new. I saw a hand over here. Aiden?
Yeah, I think the last one, the transformative power, if this has the power to change my life, which it has definitely in my life, then where does that power come from? God.
Just a coincidence. No, yeah, you're right. That's a very personal thing, and how we live our lives. All right. Well, a couple things. Let's look at some factual and historical accuracy. Okay. Moses' writing. I want to look something tonight. If you are looking for something to look at, patterns of evidence. You can find it on Amazon Prime. There's patterns of evidence of the Exodus, the patterns of evidence on the Moses controversy. There's a pattern of evidence for the Red Sea crossing. That's a two-parter, Red Sea 1 and Red Sea 2. Okay, don't watch Red Sea 2 first. Okay, I know that's confusing, but watch Red Sea 1 first and then Red Sea 2. They're really good videos, especially to watch. If you're one of those that are like, hey, I'd like to have like a family Devo night or do something together or get together with some of my friends. I don't know how to start that. Get one of these and watch it together and just pause and talk about it as you go. But there's a lot of people out there that want to just throw alleged things out there. And there's a big popular movement kind of right now that Moses couldn't have wrote the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Critics suggest that he couldn't have written it because writing was not developed until well after his death in 1451. However, the Code of Hammurabi that all of us learned about in grade school, that I got a picture of it right there, was in 1750. So I'm not sure how that gained steam. Sometimes things just don't connect the dots. But it's really good. And the thing I like about the patterns of evidence, the reason I recommend it as you're looking through, is that it really just lays the evidence out. And then during the video, it'll ask questions like, what do you think? It's just sharing the evidence out there. It's not a video that's telling you what to think. It's just putting the evidence and then kind of asking the question, the discussion. But that's an interesting thing. Here's another interesting one, and there's lots of these. Okay, there's so many of these, and I might ask for a second if you want to start thinking of another one that you might know of, or something that you remember that's resonated with you. But for a long time, King Sargon, that's mentioned in Isaiah 20, verse 1, for years there was no historical evidence of Sargon being linked to the Assyrian nation. Many people thought they were wrong. It's one of these things I always like to think. We always think, that it's wrong until people are forced to admit something was right. In 1843, they discovered the remains of Sargon's palace. You may have seen these before. It's the famous, like big statues that kind of look like horses, and they got Sargon's face on them. Over 35,000 pounds each, those things were. And then in between the legs, it has a list of all the titles and achievements and ancestry. But just a cool thing that, people said, no, that doesn't exist, this was made up, this wasn't made up, this is true, right? And again, as time goes on, and as we look at things, more instances like that have popped out. What's something else? What's something that somebody can think of, something that is out there that you've heard about, that at one point they're like, that's, you're childish if you believe in that, and then later it's found out.
For a long time, there's a passage in Genesis that talks about grapes being in Egypt, and so for a long time scholars said, there was no grapes in Egypt. This is the Bible's not reporting on this, and then they find grapes in the pyramids, remnants of grapes, and that sort of thing. So they find actual physical leftovers and seeds, and they had vineyards and had grapes in Egypt.
So there's no grapes, but yet there are grapes. Yeah, lots of little things like that. Anybody else got another one? Aiden?
Recently I heard for the Exodus, there's a kind of new scholarly work out there that they've proven that the Ark of the Covenant has the imagery of the Ark of the Covenant is rooted in Egyptian culture, which is kind of proving like it's good evidence that Israel really was in Egypt for a time and then left Egypt.
Yeah.
Historical places.
And if you really want to have fun, the patterns of evidence, has anybody ever seen the patterns of evidence, the Exodus patterns of evidence? It's, as a history teacher, when I was growing up and I was studying, and I used to think, man, I just don't get it. There's this whole period of time that's dark, and we don't know anything about it. And this guy, he just lays out the evidence. He doesn't tell you what to think, but he shows some very telling evidence that if we just shift the timelines a little bit, all of a sudden everything about the Exodus lines up, and we don't have this dark period of time where we say we don't know what happened. Maybe we don't know what happened because that period of time didn't exist. It's really a fascinating video that lays some of that out. But it goes more evidence showing that the Israelites were there. It's amazing how if you just shift the years a little bit, there's all this archaeological evidence of the Israelites, but archaeologists say, well, that can't be it because that's not the right time frame, because that's too early. Well, it's there. Let's figure that out. Yeah.
Another one is you go to like the archaeological digs in the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. You can tell when they arrived based on the presence of pig bones in the soil. And when Israel arrived, there's just a sudden absence of pig bones that are being discovered archaeologically. So you have like very solid evidence that there was no Israelite culture there, and then boom, all of a sudden there is.
Yeah. And it's a terrible time for barbecue. It's just a terrible, terrible time. But yeah, just interesting things. And again, like we can, it's some of you might be like glazing over, like, okay, what? But these are things that, again, remember if you were in my class Sunday, we were talking about the importance of knowing these types of things, so that when young people or other people are asking, you can share. Like there's more to this than just believing in a book of myths and fairy tales. There's a lot of historical connections and accuracy. When you get to Luke Acts, okay, Luke and Acts are chock full. There's a few things there that, again, people didn't believe in some of these things until they figured out it was true. In Luke Acts, if you jump down a couple bullet points there, he mentions 32 countries, 54 cities, 9 islands, 92 people named, 62 of which are not mentioned anywhere else in the New Testament, because Luke was a historian. Like, he wrote things down, and he got very particular. Things like using words like politarchs. And for a long time, people said things like, see, he just makes words up. Oh, look, we just unearthed something that talks about the politarchs, and things like that. Not a single mistake. In fact, he lists out exact titles of officials, identification of army units, information about major routes, because he's so specific. Okay, if you're trying to write a fairy tale, you don't get really specific. Okay, when you're writing facts, is when you get specific. Dates of known kings and governors. This is there's a picture there of Sir William Ramsay. He was an atheist, and he is one who he actually went out and he said, I'm going to go prove the Bible is a bunch of baloney. And so he went and he started digging, and he started digging, and he started digging. And he said, after 30 years of study, Luke is a historian of the first rank. Not merely are his statements of fact trustworthy, this author should be placed along with the greatest of historians. That's somebody who was an atheist and wanted a reason not to believe and ended up becoming a believer. A couple other quotes that kind of go along with this. Josh McDowell said, as a young scholar, I asked this question: how can I prove that Christianity is false? There's a lot of these stories. Okay, why? Because, kind of back to what Law said, there's consequences if it's true. And I better listen up and pay attention to it if it's true. So I said, how can I prove that Christianity is false? I traveled to many libraries in the U.S. and Europe in my search to find the answer. After trying to shelter the historicity, validity, and authenticity of the scriptures, I came to the conclusion that the Bible is historically trustworthy. I also discovered that if one discards the Bible as being unreliable, then one must discard almost immediately all literature of antiquity. Gets back to all those transcripts. Why are we not having these same philosophical debates about the Roman history and the Gallic Wars when there's only 10 copies in existence of that? Because there's no consequences to that. So people, we'll just believe it. It doesn't matter. And then the last one there, if you can't read it, one problem we constantly face is the desire on the part of many to apply one standard to test secular literature and another to the Bible. One must apply the same test whether the literature under investigation is secular or religious. Having done this, I believe we can hold the New Testament in our hands and say it's trustworthy and historically reliable. So that, there's why do scholars try to put different tests? Because one has consequences and real truth behind it. If it's true, it means, it gets back to that question at the beginning. If it's true, I better pay attention. Okay, I better be obedient to it. I can depend on it, all these different things. Scientific foreknowledge. This is a fun one. Again, there's lots of these. So, I mean, you could do a whole class on just this. And again, if this kind of thing bores you, try not to let it bore you. Okay? Because again, these are things, these are nuggets that you can share and you can talk about and you can look into on your own. And I hope this just kind of scratches the surface and makes you want to learn a little bit more, because there's a lot of things that are in there. Things like Isaiah 40:22, talking about the earth is a circle. What? No, the earth is flat, right? We thought it was flat all the way up into when? Somebody's like, I think it's still flat. No, I mean, he shouldn't have known that. The water cycle, 2,000 years before it was so quote unquote discovered. Okay, if you look at Ecclesiastes 1:7, Ecclesiastes 11:3, Amos 9:6, those are all, it talks about how the water flows, out from flows from the rivers to the lakes, and then it talks about being in the clouds, and just there's parts of the water cycle that they didn't understand or know at all. Job 38:16 talks about the recesses, the trenches of the deep. For a while it was thought that the ocean was fairly shallow for a large part of history. We've found trenches to be 5.5, even 6 miles deep that we know of. At some point it's like, how do we really know how deep that goes? But Job talked about it in a time where nobody thought that. Genesis 6:15, this is, a lot of you have heard this one before, but you got 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet tall, until 1858. Fun fact, Noah's Ark was the largest seagoing vessel on record until 1856, or 56, 58, I can't read. So the ratio is the 35:3, which is the perfect ratio for seagoing vessels that they use today for large amounts. Hopefully the cruise in June is to those dimensions. Not to put that in your head or anything, just, make sure you know where the safety vests are, life vests. My wife's upset at me. She doesn't like when I talk like that. And then one of my favorites, okay, is the idea of germs. Germs. There was a guy by the name of, Semmelweis. Somebody else could probably correct me on that. But Ignaz Semmelweis, he was this doctor, and he realized he hated the fact that in basically his pregnancy ward, there was a death rate of 18%. And he went around to different hospitals in Europe trying to figure out, because people told him it was just a bad cloud sometimes that came out above the hospital, and that's why there'd be large death rates. And he's like, wait, there can't be bad clouds all over Europe, at the same time. Everybody has about an 18, sometimes higher death rate. And what he found out was that the medical students and the doctors, oftentimes in the mornings, that is when they would go and do their procedures for, what's the word I'm looking for? Thank you, autopsies. Had a brain mishap. Autopsies in the morning, and they'd be working on the cadavers, okay? And then they would just put their hands in some water, use a dirty rag, and go deliver babies. And guess what? Germs. But they didn't know that. In fact, when he started coming out with these theories, and he looked at things, and in his ward, he started having the doctors wash their hands with some antiseptic and some other cleansing things in the water, and use clean towels. He started, if a lady died during childbirth, then they would make sure and change all the sheets, and they started doing all these things. And in his ward, the death rate dropped to about 1%. 1%. 18% to 1%. And guess what? He was renowned for this idea that, no, people didn't believe him. Other doctors were offended that he was claiming that they would carry germs. Like, how dare you? I'm a doctor. I do not have germs, right? And so he actually died, not really it was just kind of a terrible guy for a lot of people. It wasn't until after that, you have Florence Nightingale and Crimea War, and then in 1876, finally, they realized, hey, listen, there's this thing called bacteria and germs, and we need to pay attention. But yet, we can read through in Leviticus. Go to Leviticus 14, Leviticus 15. Talk about God, talking about the bodily discharges and what you need to do, and if you touch a dead body, then you're unclean, and all these different things. He didn't say, hey, listen, Israelites, you need to wash your hands because there's this thing called germs, right? They didn't have that word, okay? But he laid out these things for them, and they did that, and those things are there. It's scientific foreknowledge. So it's just interesting, okay? You can read into any one thing too much, but it's interesting to look at these things. Anything else on scientific foreknowledge that somebody has heard, or anything on that one? Again, there's a lot of other things, so you can go through and look, and just things that they shouldn't have known that, and yet they did. Then we get to fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, and again, I said you can look at the messianic prophecies. There's so many of them. Look in Isaiah, look in other places, and that gets usually used a lot. There's Daniel that gets used a lot. The city of Tyre is one of my favorite. Okay, the city of Tyre is a fun one. I put it down here at the bottom because if you want to go back and look, there's a fun video on the Apologetics Press, the prophecy of Tyre, proof for God. If you haven't looked at Apologetics Press website at their articles and videos, do yourself a favor, go to their website and just look at some of their articles and videos. They got some really good stuff. And especially if you have kids or grandkids or just a neighbor that you want to have a conversation with, they have a lot of good information at Apologetics Press. But Ezekiel in 1200 BC, he predicts a couple things. Okay, he predicts that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, would destroy the city, that many nations would come up against it, that the city would be scraped clean like a bare rock, the city's stones, timbers, and soil would be cast into the sea. This is not, hey guys, I think it's going to rain tomorrow. Okay, very specific. Why would you take city stones, timbers, and even the soil of the city and cast it into the sea? You got it. That's what we call an anger problem, okay? That's what we send people to anger management for. When he's like, I'm not just going to burn your house down. I'm going to dig down 10 feet, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to throw it over on your neighbor's house, and I'm going to then spit where the house used to be. I mean, it's anger management stuff. But he says the surrounding area would become a place for spreading of fishermen's nets, and it got messed up there because we flipped to PowerPoint real quick. But it says the city would never be rebuilt to its glory. And then what it says there is in 330 BC, a guy by the name of Alexander the Great, you might have heard of him, okay, Alexander the Great, he comes along because Nebuchadnezzar comes and destroys the city. Other nations come up against Tyre. They're still hanging on, this and that. One of the reasons they were able to do it is because a lot of times when these nations came in, there was a little island off the coast. And that's where they would flee to, and they had a fortification there, and nobody could just kind of squelch them out. Okay, everybody tried, but they couldn't really do it. And I'm going through this fast. But Alexander the Great comes along, and Alexander, he's, when you're called Alexander the Great, you got a little chip on your shoulder, right? There's an ego issue there. But he decides, no, other nations have tried. I'm actually going to go get these people. You know why I'm going to do it? He takes all the timber and the rock and the soil and he throws it out in the sea. And every day he has his guys throw more and more out in the sea. Why? Because he knew that Ezekiel said almost 1,000 years ago that this was going to happen, and he wanted Ezekiel to be right. No. He just wanted to conquer these people. And so he does this, and every day they get a little further, a little further, a little further, and eventually they reach the island, and they take them out, and they completely destroy them. So, it's just, to me, it's one of those fascinating things, and I'm getting too excited talking about it because I just think it's really cool. But it's one of those fascinating things that happens that 1,000 years before, how do you predict that other than prophecy? And there's so many of these as you look through Scripture. That's why it's fun to read through and look through it and things like that. Any other prophecies that just jump out off the top of your head that you think, I really like this, or comments on that? Yeah.
I don't know if it's a prophecy, but just food items, like shellfish and pork, and how we were told not to eat them in the Old Testament, and nowadays we're finding out, oh yeah, they're really not good for you.
Yeah. And unclean and clean and some different things. She's like the pork and shellfish and things that, that were unclean then, and different things that were laid out. It's fine with me if you think pork's unclean. That's just more for me. Yeah.
Isaiah mentions King Cyrus by name 600 years before King Cyrus becomes king. Saying somebody's name is pretty amazing.
Yeah, 600 years before. He said, Isaiah mentioned King Cyrus, 600 years before Cyrus becomes king. And you see some of that. And of course, I mentioned Daniel stuff around the time of King Cyrus then, and there's a lot of prophecies in Daniel that are just fascinating, and as well as the messianic prophecies. So we see those, and all of these things do what to our foundation of when the question is, why do you believe the Bible's true? They're all a building block to it. They're all a building block to put together all these cases to say, hey, when it comes to the Bible, when it comes to this idea of Christianity, yes, there are going to be plenty of people that want to lob out there and say, Christianity's not true, and this is why. And they'll say this, or they'll say that, or they may say something that off the top of your head, any one of us could be in a position where we're like, oh, I don't know, right? But to have the confidence to say, I'm a Christian because I believe Christianity is true. And while at any given time I might not have the answer for that, I have all of this that helps me build my basis, helps my worldview lens, as Kenny's been talking about, my biblical worldview lens to say, I believe there is a huge amount of evidence that Christianity is true. And you know what? If you're coming at me with something that you're alleging or a question, sometimes what we need to be able to do is say, I don't know why that happened. I don't. But this is what I do know. Or, I haven't heard that before. I'd love to study that a little bit more. I'll go look at it, you look at it, and hey, could we get back together tomorrow, or could we get back together next week for coffee and talk about it? Because I haven't really looked into that myself. Little things like that. Lost?
You really get to the linchpin thing, which is the resurrection of Jesus. If he came out of that grave, that validates everything that he said, authenticates everything that he said. And so the reason why I believe Christianity is true is because I believe Jesus is true. And that resurrection is the defining miracle of God's approval and validation of who Jesus is.
Yeah. And it's jumping ahead to next Sunday's question, difficult conversation on, did Jesus really say he was God? You hear that a lot. Did he really? So we'll get to that next Sunday. But yeah, in a lot of ways, you can easily say, hey, if Genesis 1:1 is true, and if Jesus' resurrection is true, those two things, what else matters? But we can also build lots of blocks in between those to continue to give this idea and have the confidence that, no, I don't know why this one thing happened. I do know that we live in a fallen world, and that creates problems. And oftentimes there's pain and there's suffering because we have choice. And you go the whole, would you not want to have choice? Well, if you don't have choice, that means somebody else doesn't have choice. If somebody else doesn't have choice, that means you don't have choice. And there's the whole scheme of things that people try and throw out there to chip away. And there's a whole lot of reasons why people don't want to believe in God because of that. And so those are all important things to think about and look at as we're thinking this through. Any final comments as we're winding down tonight? All right, we'll look at a few of these things. If you're in the auditorium class, we'll look at a few of these things as well on Sunday, but we'll start off with the context of, the conversation and the question and kind of looking through at it from that perspective. But the takeaway I hope you get tonight is that if you haven't really looked in to this question, do you believe that Christianity is true? Not because Kenny gets up here and says it, and he's always great about saying, hey, listen, check it for yourself. Don't take my word, right? I appreciate that, right? There's some guys that'll get up places or get up on TV and they don't want you to check it, I had a friend of mine over in Italy. He was an Italian missionary for a long time. He actually started out as a priest in the Catholic Church. And he got up to the point where he was in charge of the Vatican Library. And the cardinal that was over him, one day he went to him and said, hey, listen, I've been in the library a lot. I've been reading a lot of things. And he said, a lot of this stuff that we do just doesn't make sense to me, and it's not true. And he said, and this is coming through somebody else, right? But he said, the cardinal told him, well, but we don't let anybody know that, because if they knew it, we'd lose our power. And that day, he left the Catholic Church. And it was a big issue. And I can remember as a kid, because when I was probably 14, 15, he was in his 70s. But that story just resounded with me. And I can remember as a kid, when he would preach at the little Church of Christ in Bologna, Italy, there was a little storefront. He would preach, and there would be people outside revving their mopeds the whole time that they knew people were in the service, because the local priest still would try to go after him and not let him do what he was trying to do. And so it's things like that. People, there's a lot of different reasons, but do I believe that Christianity is true based on all of these things and based on my study and as I look? All of us can only answer that question for ourselves. You can't answer it for your spouse. You can't answer it for your kid, whether they're in grade school or whether they're 50 years old. You can only answer it for yourself, and you can only share with people why you believe that answer. Let's close in a prayer. Dear God, thank you for this evening. Thank you for this series of biblical worldview and the lenses that we look through and how we see and how we believe and how we know what we think is true. Help us continue to study in a way that always brings us closer to you. Help us to continue to study in a way that helps us be who we need to be in our lives by both word and deed and example, so that we can have an impact on others for your kingdom and for your glory. Help us do that in a way that always honors you. Help us do that in a way that shows your love and your truth. And help us do it in a way that ultimately brings us to the relationship that we one day will get to be in heaven with you when you call us home. We thank you for that hope, and we thank you for that faith that you build within us because of your Son. It's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you.